You know, a good recent follower of the channel is a guy who I really respect, even though he only made one major comment on my New York Mets 1962 podcast. He basically said, Governor, you got to do something on the 69 Amazing Mets. Now, I joked it might take a three-parter. There's no words enough in the Bible or whatever religious group you follow, the Talmud or whatever, to describe what the Mets winning at 69 meant to New York, meant to the NLE's fans, including the Montreal Expos, what it meant to baseball in a very tumultuous time of 68, 69, where the States was pretty well burning on a regular basis, dating back to the mid-60s with the riots and all that. So today we're going to be talking, some people call them the Miracle Mets or the Amazing Mets, but for me, for the talent they had, they went so far with limited talent. I think they're the best money team of all time. If you want to argue with me, please do so. But I checked their roster. I was only 4 years old and I was following their team a little bit. And I said, how in the hell did they win the World Series? And have that great July, August, and September run with such a bunch of what do you call second line players. Is like if Lafleur, LaRouche, and Schutt were not with Montreal in '79, they would have still won the Cup. They had a bunch of Yvon Lamberts and Dougie Risebrows and Doug Jarvises. They were a talented, well-coached team by, God bless his soul, Gil Hodges. We miss Gil. Now, the '69 New York Mets was the team's 8th season in MLB and culminated when they won the World Series over the Orioles. Nobody saw that coming because the Orioles were loaded with great pitchers, all the 20-game winners. They played their home games at Shea and were managed again by the late, great Gil Hodges. The team is often referred to as the Amazing Mets, a nickname coined by the great Casey Stengel, or the Miracle Mets. Now, the Casey had managed the team for a number of years, but I think it was asked by a member of the media, it could have been actually the Game of the Week guy, he said, what about the Mets? They're amazing. Now, the '69 season is very unique because it was the first campaign of divisional play in Major League Baseball. Seattle and Montreal joined the league. The Mets were assigned to newly created National League East. There are 7 previous seasons. The Mets had never finished higher than 9th place in a 10-team National League and had never had a winning season. They lost at least 100 games in 5 of those campaigns. However, they overcame mid-season difficulties while the division leaders for much of the season, the Cubs, suffered a late-season collapse, maybe directly relating to that black cat, I think, that was on the field near Ernie Banks. There's still video there if you can find it. Now, the Mets finished 162, 8 games ahead of the Cubs. Now, the Mets had a very, very good summer. We'll get to that in a second. They went on to defeat the National League West champion Atlanta Braves, led by Hank Aaron, 3-0 in the inaugural NLCS, and defeated the American League champion Orioles in 5 games. First baseman Don Clendenning, who started the year as an Expo, was named a World Series MVP on the strength of his .357 batting average, 3 home runs and 4 runs batted in. Now, some 15 years ago, on August 22nd, 2009, many of the surviving members of the '69 title team reunited at New York's Pleasant Park City Field. Of course, Tom Seaver has passed away, while Ed Kranepool and some other key players are no longer with us. Now, not too many preseason trades going on, mostly filler. They did draft Wayne Garrett in a Rule 5 draft, who was a key player with the Mets for a number of years. And he also picked up Juan Rios and Bill Short. Now, they held their spring training at Al Lang Stadium in St. Petersburg for the 8th straight year. Now, again, they finished 40 and 120 in 1962, and they eventually didn't get any better in the standings, got better with the record, but not their standings. Now, the Mets had never been over 500 after a 9-game end of any season. 7 years after the disastrous inaugural season, the Amazing Mets won the World Series, the first expansion team to do so. Now, divisional play precipitated by the expansion of each league from 10 to 12 teams. Kansas City and Seattle joined the AL, while the Padres and Expos, a lot of people thought the Expos were going to end up in the American League. They didn't, joined the National League. Before '69, the first place team in each league advanced directly to a World Series. Under the new structure, each league was divided into East and West divisions, each comprising of 6 squads, with the divisional winners facing off in a best of 5. The Mets again were slotted in the East Division, along with the Cubs, Phillies, the Pirates, the Expos, and the Cardinals, who had been world champions 64 and 67 and losers in 68. For the first time since joining the National League, the Mets could finish no lower than 6th. New York Times journalist Joseph Durso predicted the Mets would finish 4th in the East, ahead of the Pirates and the Expos. Now, on Tuesday, April 8th, with 44,000 fans in attendance at Shea, the Mets and the Expos played the first international baseball game in Major League Baseball history. The Mets had lost 7 straight opening day games since joining the NL in 62. That dubious record reached 8 when the Expos prevailed in 11-10 slugfest, despite the Mets scoring 4 runs with 2 down in the bottom of the ninth. This was highlighted by the pinch hit 3-run homer by Duffy Dyer. Apparently, this was typical Mets baseball, as one columnist described the Mets as masters of the lingering death. That basically means that you come close to winning, but lose in the late innings. Montreal Canadiens were like that in the National Hockey League last year, because they were in most of the games, but the time in the third period came, death was around the corner. Now, they took the next 2 games for the Expos, then lost 6 of their following 7 games, finishing the first 10 3-7. After a 9-14 start, the Mets showed some promise, winning 9 of the next 13 contests, including consecutive shutouts in late April against the Cubs and Expos. When Tom Seaver shut out the Braves 5-0 on May 21st, the Mets were a miracle 18-18, their best start in franchise history. But the Mets lost their next 5 contests, starting with a 15-3 shellacking by the Braves, followed by a 3-game sweep by the Astros, who outscored the Mets 18-4, and finished with a loss at Shea to lowly Padres. At the end of play on May 27th, the Mets had fell to 18-23. However, the sun came out in May, and the Mets reeled off a club record 11 straight, which included 3 walk-off wins and dominant pitching, as the Mets' young pitching staff yielded a stingy 2 runs per game. Starting with the 42nd contest, the Mets went 82-39 the rest of the way, including an astonishing 38-11 in their last 49 games. Now, they weren't home run hitters, they weren't doubles or triples hitter, it was small ball and pitching. Now, despite this performance, the Mets suffered 2 mid-season 3-game series sweeps at the hands of the Astros, who manhandled the Mets all season, taking 10 of the 12 games that the squads played. There were also no hit by Bob Moose of the Pirates on September 20th, only 5 days after becoming the first Major League team to strike out 19 times in a 9-inning contest. This game, they won 4-3 on a pair of 2-run home runs by hometown hero Ron Swoboda against the Cardinals' later crackpot pitcher, Steve Carlton. You couldn't blame the Jews back then because nobody was talking to him. Little inside information, by the way. Now, trailing the Cubs for much of the season, the Mets found themselves in 3rd place 10 games back on August 14th. But they won 14 of their last 17 contests during August and 24 of 32 during September and October. The surge past the Ernie Banks-led Cubs. They finished again 162 8 games ahead of Chicago. That 18-game differential, recovering from being 10 games behind the Cubs to finish 8 games ahead of them, is one of the largest turnarounds in MLB history, so you can't just blame the Red Sox. Cubs ended up 92-70, Pirates at 88-74, Cardinals at 87-75, the Phillies at 63-99, and the Expos, who were better on the road than at home, went 52-110. Now, the key reason the Mets took everything that year, they were just as good at home and the road. They almost had identical records, 52-30 at home and 48-32 on the road. Now, the record, like I said, this is just completely amazing, ladies and gentlemen. No pun intended. 19-9 in June, 15-12 in July, 21-10 in August, and 23-7 in September, and again, 6-1-7 win percentage. Now, the 10-8 against Chicago, 13-5 against Montreal, 12-6 against the Phillies, 10-8 against the Pirates, 12-6 against the Cardinals, 8-4 against the Braves, 6-6 against the Reds, a ludicrous 2-10 against the Astros, 8-4 against the Dodgers, 11-1 against the Padres, so they were 24-6 against the expansion teams, and 8-4 against the Giants. Now, the team drew, get this, number 1 in Major League Baseball, 2.1 million fans for the 81 home dates. Now, the key to the team, of course, was there was 2 major Hall of Fame players on the squad. Terrific Tom Seaver, who won 25 contests that year, en route to the Cy Young, and a young Nolan Ryan, who was playing in the third season, started reliever with his major fastball, a tremendous season. Now, Seaver was inducted in the HOF in 92 and Ryan in 99. Manager Gil Hodges was elected to Hall in 2022, and of course, Bull Durham keeps him alive in the minds of people, again, in baseball. Bench coach Julio Guibera and Director of Player Development Wadi Herzog are also in the Hall of Fame. Now, the Orioles boasted 4 future Hall of Famers in a roster: Jim Palmer, Frank Robinson, Brooks Robinson, and Earl Weaver. So you're saying to yourself, how can a team led by Weaver, with Palmer, the great pitching staff, Robinson, and Brooks, lose? Well, we're getting that in a second. The key players, of course, on the Mets were Tommy Agee, this is opening day starters, the great underrated Ken Boswell, Ed Charles, Rod Gaspar, Jerry Grody, a very underrated catcher, the team captain, Bud Harrelson, the very, very talented Cleon Jones, and Ed Kranepool. And of course, Tom Seaver as the starter. Now, to me, the big thing, of course, was the Don Clendenning trade. Kevin Collins, Steve Renko, Bill Carden, and Dave Colon were traded by the Mets to the Expos for Don Clendenning, and that was the key one. Now, Grody had 6 homers and 40 RBIs that year, Kranepool 1149, Boswell 332, Wayne Garrett 139, Harrelson no homers, 24 RBIs, but Cleon Jones, again, a stellar 340, 12 home runs and 75 RBIs, Tommy Agee 26 homers, 76 RBIs, and Ron Sabota, again, the heart of the underrated Mets, 9 and 52. Art Shamsky, 14 homers, 47 RBIs. Clendenning had some good numbers in limited time, 12 homers, 37 RBIs. A young Amos Otis was also on the team, including Duffy Dyer. And Al Weiss, 2 home runs, 23 RBIs. But Shamsky, 300 average, helped out. But look at the starting staff, ladies and gentlemen. Very, very strong. 25 and 7 for Tommy. Jerry Koosman, very underrated, 241 innings pitched, 17 and 9. Gary Gentry, 13 and 12. Don Cardwell, 8 and 10. And Jim McAndrew, 6 and 7. Ryan went 6 and 3. Spot duty and starter. Jack Delorio, 1 and 4. And of course, the magic player for the relief staff was Canadian great Ron Taylor, who won with the Cardinals in '64, but he drew experience. 9 and 4 with 13 saves. And Tuggy McGraw had a great season as well. 9 and 3 with 12 saves. Cal Kunze, 7 saves. So between the three of them, they had 32 helpers, as we say. Now, against Atlanta, it was basically the late offense that did it. In the opening contest, he scored 5 runs in the 8th inning to win 9-5. Tom Seaver, again, had a rough contest, giving up home runs to Tony Gonzalez and Hank Aaron. Now, game 2, Taylor got the win in relief with the Tug McGraw, the save. In this contest, Tommy Agee, Ken Boswell, and Cleon Jones hit home runs. Of course, the Hank Aaron had another home run. And they gave up 5 runs in the 5th inning, but again, they held on. The final contest, it was another slugfest. Mets won 7-4. Ryan took the win. Hank Aaron had a great series with his 3rd home run. Orlando Cepeda had a homer, but Tommy Agee, Ken Boswell, and Wayne Garrett, 3 of the most underrated players on the squad. And of course, Garrett and Boswell were big in '73. They won 7-4. Now, the World Series got kind of freaky. Mike Cuellar defeated Tom Seaver in the opening contest, 4-1. And the big 3-run home run, the 3 runs in the 4th inning did in Seaver. Cuellar got a big win, and Don Buford had the big blast. But here where Don Clendenning got in, Jerry Koosman pitched a great gun. He won 2-1, and it was Don's home run was the difference. And of course, Ron Taylor got the save. Now, this was a big game. It went back to New York, and a lot of people felt that they were going to be flushed away at home, and they were. Baltimore could barely score any runs at all in the series. Last 3 games, scoring only 4. Now, Tommy Agee and Ed Kranepool had home runs in a 5-0 win in Game 3, and Gary Gentry bet Jim Palmer would Ryan get the save. Now, Tom Seaver responded with a very, very good 6-hitter. with Don getting his second home run of the series. And of course, Svoboda had a great series as well, making some key catches in the outfield. Now, the 5-3 win in Game 5 was a slight upset. I feel the Mets were a better overall team than Baltimore because the Mets were very underrated with the small ball. They led 3-0 early against Jerry Koosman, but New York rebounded with 2 runs in the 6th, 1 in the 7th, and 2 in the 8th. Don had his Clendenin had his third home run and a big dinger by Al Weiss. Now, that 69 team, again, people basically don't really remember as much. For people in their 50s and 60s of age, it's comparable to the 86 Montreal Canadiens. It's comparable to what they call miracle Stanley Cup runs of the time. Now, ironically, it became a big line joke in Oh God, the movie with George Burns and John Denver, when George Burns, as God would said, the last miracle I performed was the 69 Mets. Now, part of the movie Frequency is set in Queens. In 69, his firefighter avid Mets fan Frank Sullivan, played by Dennis Quaid, and his family followed the Amazins through the World Series. Now, it's been referenced different times during the years. Everybody Loves Raymond, Men in Black 3, Growing Pains, the Koosmans. But the greatest line, the TV sitcom The Simpsons, episode Money Bart, Homer Simpson says the 69 Mets will live on forever. See, this helped Expo fans as well because it drew more attention to the quality of the teams in the NL East. And the NL East became the most popular division in all of baseball. I know that's weird to say. Before the AL East was popular, the NL East. We'll put this in perspective, ladies and gentlemen. St. Louis, Pittsburgh, and Philadelphia, okay, and the other key teams in the division were so popular in Canada, like the whole division were fans of. It just happened to be that the Mets won. We'll put this in perspective, ladies and gentlemen. Chicago Cubs had a lot of fans in Canada. Pirates were loved because of Dave Parker and Stargell. Cardinals, again, because of Ozzie and like the Herzog small ball. The Phillies because of Schmidt and later Pete Rose. Montreal Expos because of the youth movement. The NL East, again, was the most popular North American division in Major League Baseball. And the Mets opened the door literally by winning the first time. Mets won in 73, of course. The Cubs got there in the early 80s against the Padres. The Pirates were winning the division on a regular basis. Won the 71 and 79 World Series. The Cardinals were also strong in the 70s going into the 80s. The Phillies were winning the division but losing to the Dodgers. And the Expos finally got there in 81 but lost Monday to Monday. So between 69 and 82, 83, 84, again, the Indians and the rest of the NL East weren't big in Canada, but the Mets opened the door. So what the Mets did, playing that first game in the Expos, every Expo fan loves the Mets. And that's why I have a fascination with getting Dave Kingman to the Baseball Hall of Fame, because I believe that the New York Mets made baseball. They got us out of the negativity of North America and of terrorism and of the negativity towards black people and Indians and all that. The only thing you could look forward to that was positive at the time was the New York Mets in 69. And, of course, Joe Namath with the Jets. But, ladies and gentlemen, it's a miracle that the North America survived the late 60s, early 70s because of, the Jewish, Palestinian, wars, Russia, the gas crisis, recession, depressions. Like I said, the New York Mets, and again, it was basically a ragtag group of players. Some cast off, but the key, Don Clendening there, that's how we pronounce it in Canada, he was the key. Because there has to be a straw that stirs the drink in the World Series. Okay? I talked about people like Brian Doyle and different people. One player's got to rise up. You look at Gene Tennis in 72, okay? You look at some of the key players for Pittsburgh in the late 70s. But I think the Mets, again, there should be a plaque in Cooperstown. I think that's what they should. The Baseball Hall of Fame should induct full teams. What a concept. Put the whole team in. You start with 69 Mets. That could be a concept. Anybody follower the channel wants to look at that, putting a Hall of Fame team in, the full team, the World Series team in 69, rather than individual players. They meant so much to so many people because New York has always was in crisis in the 60s and 70s, right? As you know, like I said, all the way into the 70s as well. Before Reggie Jackson saved the Yankees. And don't forget, the Yankees, no more Mickey Mantle. Like, the Yankees were in the wilderness up until, from early 60s to 1976. There was no Billy Martin manager. I mean, Thurman Munson wasn't really a big factor up until the early to mid-70s. So it's pretty weird. So listen, you're probably wondering why I didn't do a podcast on the Amazing Mets before, because it could have took 50 minutes to do. I'm keeping it to 21, 22 minutes. But if you love baseball, have respect for the Chicago White Sox. They basically only won, 38 games this year. You want to stay away from the Mets number. If they share that, watch if the White Sox don't come back like the Mets in a couple of years and win the World Series. Never say never in baseball. Baseball is a silly game. It sounds simple. You throw the ball, you catch the ball, you hit the ball. Say like Bull Durham. But I'll remember this for the rest of my life, ladies and gentlemen. I'm at the Paramount Theater in Campbellton in the early 1990s watching Field of Dreams. And the Frank Welly character, Moonlight Graham, he's saying all these people, and he said, Gil Hodges, and you don't see Gil Hodges. But the memory of recognizing Gil Hodges, the producer or director and the writers basically said, all you have to do is mention Gil Hodges, it'll bring back spirituality. Ladies and gentlemen, fans of the Mets, 86 was special, of course. I watched Game 7, I covered Game 6 and Game 7. But the Mets in 69, we never knew in a million years. Maybe they gave motivation to the 71 Montreal Canadiens to win the Cup, or the 86 Montreal Canadiens. Ken Dryden said it best, never underestimate your opponent. And that's why I think Earl Weaver is a fucking total idiot. Because he underrated the Mets. You never underestimate professional baseball players. And listen, how do you put, after that, like the free agent era and all that, getting all these superstars, people didn't win the World Series. If they follow the 69 Mets, and look at the Twins winning the World Series as well. They didn't have the best players. Sure, they had some stars, but they had a lot of, role players. I'd rather have 4 good third lines than 1 good number 1 line, and the rest is crap. But I was only 4 years old, and most of the Mets games we didn't get, because the Montreal Expo games, we get a Pirates game from Jerry Park or whatever. But as I got older, I watched the 73 World Series game too. The infamous incident, and I've said in my podcast before, my mother asked me to go outside 27 times between inning 7 and the extra innings of A's, God bless them, Las Vegas A's, and the Mets. Because I missed the Amazing Mets in 1969. I was too young. And even my father said that. He said, you watch a Mets game, your thoughts of when they make a comeback, the Miracle Mets. Every time I see a Mets game, I think of 69. And he still traded Nolan Ryan. He would have won in 73 if he would have traded Nolan Ryan. Who trades Nolan Ryan for Gozzi and it's a bucket of bucks? Holy freak, ladies and gentlemen. Anyway, so listen, thanks for everybody as a fan of the Amazing Mets, especially 69 and Miracle Mets. Casey Stengel, if he wouldn't have said that, someone else, it could have been a priest in Queens or the Bronx or Manhattan would have came up and he said, like to thank our Lord and Savior for allowing the Mets to win 20 games in the last 24. So, there's a God when a team like the 69 Mets wins the World Series. Put it on a t-shirt, sell it for charity. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, Dave Kingman deserves to be in the Baseball Hall of Fame because he saved the Mets from themselves in the 70s, and he did a lot for the Cubs. NL East, ladies and gentlemen, greatest division in baseball history, in my personal opinion. And the Mets won the first division. A miracle. Thanks for listening. Bye.